Hey there, hope you're enjoying your summer thus far. I wanted to do something a little different today. This is our first member/Patreon exclusive video, and it's a little Christmas in July for you. As one of my most valued supporters, rather than just letting you find out what I did for the Eggnog Experiment when this year's video drops, I wanted to fill you in on what I'm planning for it so you know what to look forward to, and if you'd even like to make as close to the same eggnog as me to compare notes, you can do so. It's a little too bright for this. Two topics in particular came up more than once in the comments section of the Eggnog videos last year that I think would be pretty interesting to explore further. First, the concept of mixing everything but the dairy. Apparently, it's a pretty common suggestion on various forums if people are concerned about either shelf stability or fridge space, as the bulk of the volume in the mixture is composed by the dairy. By decreasing it, you'll be able to put everything into one jar instead of three, and increase the alcohol percentage of the solution, which will in turn decrease the chances of any bacteria deciding to throw a party in the jar when you're not looking. Second, the idea that Alton Brown's dairy ratios seem to be essentially recreating half and half with extra steps. If half and half is already half milk and half cream, then a mixture of equal parts milk, half and half, and cream could theoretically be needlessly complex. I would like to test both of these ideas at the same time. To do so, I've made this helpful matrix. To make it semi-simple, I'll be doing the equivalent of 2 full batches. A full one without dairy, a half batch with Alton's dairy combo, and a half batch with just half and half. When I taste it, I'll pour a glass of the normal recipe, a glass of the aged with just half and half, and 2 glasses from the dairy excluded recipe. One with just half and half added, and one with equal parts whole milk, half and half, and heavy cream. If you'd like to experiment alongside me in any capacity, I'll be making my batch on or around August 5th and tasting it on or around September 30th for a full 2-month aging. Which also means this will be the first video where I taste it at a full 8 weeks instead of 7. This year, to both get around the added complexity of proofing with cream or otherwise and make it a more affordable venture, I'll be sticking to the following 3 80 proof spirits. For the rum, we're sticking with Appleton Estate's signature blend. Don't worry, I have a second bottle back there. It was a standout in last year's batch, ironically by not standing out. It lent just the right amount of caramel and butterscotch sweetness without the hogo flavors that tend to come with higher end rums like the Appleton 15 or Mount Gay XO. Those profiles can be interesting in their own way, but tend to dominate other flavors when mixed. For the bourbon, we'll be switching to the infamous Basil Hayden's. As far as whiskey goes, it can be maligned by certain aficionados for being so smooth that it's boring. But that is more or less what I'm after this time around. The classic caramelized oak notes are still present without being overwhelming. It maintains a consistent level of quality that surpasses other bourbons at the same price point, and in my experience, it carries the least amount of bite out of any bourbon I have tasted to date. Not nearly as complex as the Stag Junior or Old Forester Statesman from the last 2 batches, but should be more approachable, enough so that my non-whiskey loving friends can still appreciate the eggnog. Lastly, for the cognac, I have really enjoyed our relationship with Hennessy in this series. Their VS was my favorite part of the first batch, and their VSOP was a really excellent elevation of those flavors in the next 2 batches. However, it's a little pricier, ranging from $50 to $70, depending on where you get it. And part of my goal with this year's experiment is to also make the recipe more accessible, so I'm aiming for that $30 to $40 range. I picked up 2 different VSOPs that fit the bill, Maison Rouge and ABK6. I think I know which one we're gonna go with, but let's taste to confirm. Up first, we'll start with the Maison Rouge, which still has some of those familiar fruit leathery vibes on the nose, but perhaps in a more muted way than with the Hennessy, which, bummer, but again, trying to make this more accessible. A little bit of raisin, a little bit of plum. It's got a really nice brown sugar sweetness up front, and then some rich fig in the body. The part that gives me the most pause is there's a pretty bitter finish. Like, you get some baking spices, nutmeg and allspice come to mind, but that bitter finish is really in your face, and theoretically that should have even gone away a little bit, considering that this bottle has sat with, you know, about halfway full for a couple months. You can tell I bought that one first, but I bought it and was not entirely pleased by what I tasted initially, and so it was kind of a last-ditch effort to try something else. And I looked up some stuff about easy sipping 40% budget VSOP cognacs, and that's a hard ask, but ABK6 consistently hit a lot of those lists up towards the top. So despite it does look a little bit lighter in color, so I'm a little worried about that, but let's get in there and see what we can pick up. Ooh. So this one is giving less rich plum and dark fruit and more peachy. I'm getting lighter stone fruits. So think peaches and nectarines instead of cherries and plums. That's pretty crazy. I have not had a cognac with that profile, but I'm into it. Let's confirm on the palate. It brings to mind like a pastry. Something like an apple Danish. That's kind of the vibe I get off of this. Almost a little hint of acidity. Not as much bitterness on the finish. Some soft vanilla-y spice, and just a little woodsy hint on the finish, but not too crazy. So that's definitely going to be the one I go with. I do like some of the richer fruit characteristics on the Maison Rouge, but again, that finish really turns me off from it, so I am going to have to lean towards the ABK6. It will create a more light profile than on the previous eggnogs, I guess theoretically anyways, but I'm into it, so you know what? Let's do this. I think it'll be fun to see how this goes. Now that we've settled on the ABK6 VSOP cognac, let's head back outside to chat about the rest of the ingredients. I'll still be using the dairy and eggs from my milkman, so unless you're in Colorado and can get Longmont dairy farms, I'd say just make sure your half and half are creams. Don't have any thickening agents in them like xanthan gum or carrageenan. They sell Eggland's Best Eggs, which are pretty cheap and readily available pretty much everywhere, so that should be easy to copy. I have been told in several comments to use more high quality eggs, maybe on a future batch, but not this year. I also don't think the sugar matters that much, but for the record, I'm using CNH. Lastly, I'd like to reiterate that I make no claims of food safety in my videos, and you age milk and eggs at your own risk. That being said, you should be up to speed on this year's Aged Eggnog Experiment. Let me know if you liked this more personal approach. Happy Christmas in July, and see you at the end of November for the results of this year's batch. Cheers!